So first of all, I just want to say thank you to anyone that's going to be watching this. Like, share, comment, subscribe to anywhere that is posted. And so I'm here with Liz Hedgecock and Paula Harmon, the writers of the Castor and Fleet series. So Liz, did you want to just go ahead and introduce yourself and talk about your books and yourself? And
Yeah, sure. Okay, so briefly, I'm Liz Hedgecock and I write mystery books. And I switch between the 19th and the 21st century. I do sometimes murder people, but I do usually clean up after myself. So apart from the Castor and Fleet books that I write with Paula, I write a spin-off series called the Maisie Frobisher Mysteries, various Sherlock Holmes reimaginings, a contemporary cozy mystery series called Pippa Parker Mysteries, and a humorous modern mystery series set in London called The Magical Bookshop. And when I'm not writing, I'm either trying to get my two teenagers out of their rooms or else I'm communing with our two cats, Frankie and Luna. And that's me.
thanks, Liz. And Paula?
Hi, I'm Paula. Apart from writing with Liz, I've also got two mystery series of my own. One is set in Roman Britain in the 2nd century, that sort of golden age style, mildly humorous. And the spin-off from the Castor and Fleet series, which is called the Margaret Desmarais series. And I also have some collections of short stories and some other things, which are slightly more in the what if sort of realm rather than the mystery sort of realm. Apart from that, I work full time in a job which is impossible to describe. And when I'm not doing that and I'm not writing and I'm not doing laundry, I'm cooking. I like cooking and experimenting with cooking.
Oh wow, I definitely need to try some of this food that you've
when lockdown ends.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I've seen you posting on the author page and things, a few of your concoctions, and they always look really nice. So yeah, so first question, where did this collaboration come from? Where did the initial idea come from?
What I remember is that Liz and I got to know each other through a writers group on Facebook and were beta reading for each other. And then one mad moment, Liz got in touch with me and asked if I fancied to collaborate at all. We hadn't met each other. We live at completely opposite ends of the country, and we eventually met up by phone and I took it from there, thrashed out some ideas. I don't know whether Liz wants to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember if you asked me or I asked you. I think we both maintain it was the other one that extended the hand of collaboration. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah, we got together to write. We wrote 3 books. Then we actually met each other, and then we decided to write 3 more.
Oh wow. So did you find it easier writing after you'd sort of met and got to know each other a little bit more, or is it not really made much of a difference to the?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think.
Probably about the same.
Off the cuff question I'm asking you there.
Yeah, and I think we got to know each other through doing it, if you like. So I think, and we communicated every day when we were writing. So I think that way you just get to know each other, and I suppose you get to know each other a bit through your characters sometimes too.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the reason I asked that is because obviously I'm writing with Chantal and we've never really had any sort of interactions before other than sort of online, a few messages. And when we started the first book, and as you say, you do get to know each other through your characters, and that sort of the more you know about each other and know about each other's characters, the writing improves. So yeah. So how does the process work for you when you collaborate together, Liz? Is it sort of, do you have a set structure that you each follow, or is it sort of I wrote so many words and pass it on to Paula and then it's...
Okay, well, I think when we had our initial phone call, which was quite weird hearing each other's voices actually, we sort of thrashed this out and we decided we'd do a chapter each. So one of us would write a basic structure, and because Paula had the initial idea, then she did the first one, and then she wrote the first chapter, sent it to me. I wrote the second chapter. We each write from one character's point of view. So she writes Catherine and I write Connie. And we went from there. And of course, we had all these arrangements that we'd try and write, a chapter a week of this story, and we'd be done in June. I think we started in January. And I think we were finished in early February. And then I said, I've had an idea. So we just kind of carried on with the second book and took it from there.
Yeah, I think the fact that we both wanted to, hesitate to say, have the control of having a character each, and I think that way we felt we could tell the story really well without losing any feeling of our own writing in that. And I think what's pleased both of us is a number of people who said if we didn't know, we couldn't tell it was two people writing, because our styles are complementary, not the same, but they're complementary. And so it just seemed a very natural way, and we got to know our characters really well that way. We could sort of like grow them as we went along, and like Liz said, it just sort of took off. And there were days when I think we probably got 3 chapters somehow or other, and I was then commuting a lot, so I was on the train, and I would, in the commute from Salisbury to London, I could usually write a chapter, send it to Liz just before I went to work, and then I'd have one waiting for me when I was coming home on the train. So
yeah, it's a lot
yes,
more.
we're fitting all around Paula's commute, in fact.
I mean, the amount of times I was sat in stations, either in Waterloo or in Salisbury, sitting there on the platform after I got off the train, thinking, right, the email list to Liz before I go any further. It was quite exciting, really.
And it is exciting, because it's like, I know from working with Chantal, it's that whole thing of you passing it over and then you don't quite know what's going to come back, and you've got that excitement of waiting for it to come back, and when's it going to come back. Well, yeah. And it's almost because you get to be a reader as well, because you can read that person's chapter and see where they've taken it, and then you get to be a writer and work on your character and such. Have you ever felt restricted by where, say, Liz has taken it? Has it ever caught you off guard, or do you have like a set structure that you follow so you both know where you're going with things? Or
caught off guard, yes. Restricted, no. I think sometimes when we do have structure, so we know broadly speaking where it's going to go.
Yeah.
Sometimes been really surprised, sometimes literally laughed out loud when I've read one, in the office at lunchtime, and thought, oh right, okay, so now I've got to deal with this. And I think that I did the same to Liz, and she'll probably expand on that. But no, not restricted, no, not at all.
No, I'm normally fine. The only thing is when Paula kills somebody who was going to do something.
You killed one person off, I'm sure.
No, you killed more than one. You're much more bloodthirsty than I am. So.
And have you had any plotter versus pantser showdowns throughout the?
I don't think so, because we have something to work to, and I think we both quite like that. It feels, not safe exactly, but you sort of know where you are, and of course, that you're going to have to pick it up down the line as well.
And I think also because we edit afterwards, we just write and then we edit later on. Sometimes, I know there was a chapter I wrote and it followed, it was where it was supposed to be, it did what it was supposed to do, but I wasn't happy with it. And later on I rewrote it and was much happier. We were both much happier with it then. I think, we've got the leeway to be able to do that. Yeah.
It must be quite encouraging as well to have one another to sort of give you that boost if you're having a bit of a day where you think, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. Did you plan to write the number of books that you've written for this series, or did you get to a point where it was kind of like, oh, I've got a new idea, and you both sort of carried on? And is the series done, or do you think there's potential?
Who's taking this one?
Liz, do you want to answer?
Yeah, well, I think originally we said let's try this once, and we, I don't think either of us wanted to commit to a set number of novels in case we hated it. Luckily, we didn't hate it. When we were about halfway through the first one, I think I sort of said to Paula, look, we've got all these characters, and I'm sure that we can do more than one book. And I may have said, how do you feel about 3 books? And she went, okay. And then we got to the 3rd book, and Paula wrote this marvelous kind of cliffhanger type, whoa, we can't just stop there, obviously we've got to write more books. So yes, the first 3 came out pretty quickly. 4, 5 and 6 were at greater intervals. I tend to write books in 3s anyway. I don't know why, I just do. So yes, that was kind of where we were at. Yeah,
and I think we talked about doing a very short novella. We finally got around to doing it at Christmas time last year, which felt like at the end of last year a nice thing to do, given everything else that had been going on. And by that time, obviously, we'd also developed our own spin-offs from the books, Maisie series and the Margaret Demeray series, and so we're working on those. So the main characters, Catherine and Connie, come into those books somewhere. They may only be references, they may actually be physically there, but they're sort of there. And I think at the moment that's probably how we see it, you know. But who knows? Things change. There might be another novella. Who knows?
Well, that does lead into my next question, which is how much leeway do you have with each other's characters in developing them and things like that? But I suppose you might have got to a stage now where you know each other's characters so well that it's just second nature to you.
I think I personally wouldn't take liberties, if you like. I mean, I invented Albert in the first book, but Liz took him under her wing quite quickly. And
well, I think Connie did.
Well, yeah, and he changed hair colour from what was in my imagination to what was in Liz's. So that was, but as I hadn't said, it didn't really matter. But no, and I've got one of Connie's, somebody from Connie's family in the Margaret book, but I did run it past Liz first to make sure she was happy with that in there. And I think I don't think either of us would take liberties with them because we respect them. So I think, and like you say, I think it's true that we do know them well enough to know that what they would and wouldn't do.
It is interesting sort of how the characters can take you sometimes as well, like you were just saying about introducing Albert then. And you know, with Chantal and I, she introduced a school bully in a chapter of one of our books that was just sort of a background character, and then I took him on and made him this absolute evil being, shall we say, and he's now become the main antagonist of the series, but it was completely, you know, not intended to be like that. So it's quite interesting how these characters can sort of be put in there and then you can run with them. They can sort of run away with themselves. But so how do you determine the balance in tone when it comes to the book, so between heartfelt and dark? And
I think some of it comes down to the structure and where the sort of the plot developments are going to be, and they're quite full books, I think, in terms of there's a fair bit going on in terms of plot, and there's quite a lot of characters, because I think the further you get into a series, the sort of more detailed your story world gets. So it's trying to fit everything in, really, I think. And of course, you want to have contrasts in there. You don't want everything to be, you know, full on racing around London plot type stuff, and you don't want everything to be, you know, light-hearted family knockabout. So it's kind of, you know, you sort of feel your way in, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. You need the light and the dark. Yeah, we didn't want it. They're not dark books at all, but there needs to be something. There needs to be a low point to highlight the high points, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of romance in there as well, which, you know.
Yeah, I do love that. I loved the Christmas novella, just the little bits at home and the sort of like warm moments that you had around everything else that was going on with the pantomime and everything. It worked really well. Are you guys quite competitive with your sense of humour? Because you're both quite witty and especially in writing. So yeah, do you sort of get a bit competitive with that, or?
I don't think so.
No. I really enjoy having fun with our characters.
Yeah.
I think, you know, some of our characters are quite sharp and they have some good comebacks. So it's really them doing the work. We just, you know, write it down.
Yeah. And I think, you know, sometimes we'll put something in and take it out later on just to have a bit of fun with each other, I think. But we don't always keep it in. But
kind of interest.
Well, I think, like, you know, like some of the dressing up things, you know, we're quite good fun getting them dressed up. But yeah, so yeah, no, we don't really have any competition at all.
Good. And what do you love most about each other's characters?
I love Connie's calm. She always seems, I have a feeling that really she's a lot more confident underneath than she realizes. And that she always has been and hasn't ever realized it. And because she's quite calm, generally speaking, she sort of sees things that perhaps Catherine doesn't, because Catherine's too busy sometimes flapping a little bit, and Catherine isn't as confident as she appears. So they're a really nice contrast, I think. I love Connie's mother. Well, not love is probably the wrong word. I'm scared of Connie's mother. I think I met her in some of my great aunts. And I love what she did with Albert. I love the person he's turned into, which wasn't what I was expecting at all. But I'd really like what she's done, and I could go on, but I won't.
I think with Catherine, she can be so brave and so very resourceful, even when she's feeling scared to death. And I think that's brilliant about her. And she gets on and she does things, and sometimes she's not quite sure, but she actually goes for it. And I think that's something lovely about her. And also, I mean, her family are great. I love the scenes with Roderick.
He deserves a book. I just haven't written one yet.
Maybe we need a Roderick series. Sorry, Paula.
And what do you admire most about each other's writing? Is there a certain like style or discipline that you admire in one another? Or
Liz's writing is really clean. It's really engaging straight away, and you get straight into the story, straight into her characters. You can see it all quite clearly. And discipline, yes, she's much more disciplined than I am at writing. She just is. So, you know, she's more controlled. And I admire the fact that she can dictate and then make sense of what she's dictated into her app. That's what amazes me.
Oh wow! I mean, that is that is a skill.
Still trying to pick mine. But yes, with Paula, I really like some of her lyrical descriptive writing. And like I said, I love the family scenes and the interplay of the characters. So those are two things that I really like.
Cool. And I know I've already sort of touched on this, but what can we expect from this series? Can we expect any more from the series? Do you think there might be another sort of novella coming out? I know you did a Christmas themed one. Would there be a Easter themed?
We did set up possibly another novella. So I mean that's quite possible. And I think with Cast from Fleet, I think generally with writing, I've now learned to say, like, just never say never about anything, because I never thought I'd be writing a spin-off series. You know, so who knows? Maybe they will come back after a break, because I think we did the 6 books and we felt, right, that's it for now. But that was for now, so let's wait.
And at that point, both of their families would have been quite young. So, and even though they were in an era where they would have had masses of help, that's sort of not the point. We both want them both to be fairly hands-on mums, I think, and so I think we'd sort of factored that into our thinking too, hadn't we? So if we did, like I said, it would be a break. So it would be maybe a few years, maybe possibly into the beginning of the new century. So.
Yeah. And you talking about the era there. So how do you think Connie and Catherine would react to being invited to a Zoom meeting?
Catherine would worry about what she was going to wear. Well, they probably both would, but Catherine would, and she would. She'd be interested in the technology, but I think she'd probably shout, because the telephone's comparatively new, so or certainly new to her. So I think she'd be shouting and wearing a hat.
With Connie, what do you think?
Probably you'd see Connie's midsection because she's so tall, so she'd be there with her. She could fit herself into it. And then possibly going, is this thing on, and accidentally muting herself, or trying to have children out of the way of it. So yes.
Yeah, I can't imagine Bee sitting still. She'd be right in the frame, wouldn't she?
Yeah, they're putting their different backgrounds on and everything.
Oh, I can see that actually. Just from the bits that I've read of Bee, I can see that she'd be quite hyperactive and probably really enjoying herself.
Yeah, she's a hands-on child, isn't she?
She does get into the Margaret books, and she's sort of like, you know, she's still quite independent as a young adult, so she's never going to go away.
And how do you think that Connie and Catherine would have spent their lockdown?
I think Catherine would have been crawling the walls, frankly. I don't think she really likes being indoors too much. It probably reminds her too much of being in the typewriting office, and so I don't know what she'd be doing. And James would be busy writing and driving her up the wall, I expect. I just think she'd probably have to go and volunteer for something. I don't know what, but you know, just going to do something practical just to get out of the house.
I
Unless
can
you could solve a mystery online.
maybe that's it. Maybe they go to concerts online or the music hall online. That would be good.
Yeah.
All of the fun and none of the faffing around. And
Funny
the,
little side note. A funny little side note to that is I actually had a thing come through my letterbox today that's a mystery that I bought online that comes in this little box and you can solve it with your family over lockdown.
Oh wow!
So I don't know what it's going to be like, but I shall keep you posted on that. Anyway, Liz, so how do you think that Connie would?
Well, if there were online events, I think she'd go to those. I think she would miss the shops terribly. If she could order things online, I can imagine her getting lots of things online and then trying them on and sending them all back. That's definitely possible. I think she might try some new hobbies and probably not enjoy them very much. And I have a feeling she might knit socks because she felt she ought to, or scarves. Even if socks and scarves weren't really needed, I think she'd feel she had to do something, you know, for the country. No matter how many drop stitches there were.
And Liz, so we've talked about a spin-off series. So can you tell us a bit about Maisie Frobisher and sort of what she's all about? Absolutely.
Well, Maisie Frobisher kind of has a very brief appearance in a few of the Castor and Fleet books. We first see her in The Case of the Black Tulips, the first one, where there's a dinner at her house and we see her very briefly and she seems a bit of a spoilt brat, to be quite honest. And at that point, she pretty much is. She's an only child. She comes from a rich family. She lives in her own little social bubble. We see her a bit more in The Case of the Masquerade Mob, where she has rather a bittersweet time. And she decides that she's going to go off and travel and do something different. And that's where her spin-off series picks up, because she gets to see a bit of the world and see that, you know, not everywhere is like where she's grown up, and she gets a hold of herself basically. And of course she comes across some mysteries along the way, and she gets thwarted, which is very good for her. So yes, there are 4 books in the series at the moment, and I'm sure there's going to be a few more.
Fantastic. And Paula, did you want to just
yeah, so far I've got 1 in my series, but it will be a series which is following Margaret, who's Catherine's younger sister. The first one's called The Wrong Sort to Die. Margaret is quite a few years younger than Catherine, so at the beginning, in the very first book, she's about 15, I think, 15, 16, and she's just a sort of typical teenager, really is aggravated by everything that's going on in her life, which is that they're a bit short of money and she can't do the things she wants to do. But seeing her sister have the courage to try and do something about that, starts to change her mind about what she could do, and she goes from thinking it doesn't really matter what I do to deciding she's going to become a doctor ultimately. So by the time my spin-off series, which is set quite a bit later, a bit before the First World War, she's working in a hospital in London, and everything's going relatively okay. Life hasn't quite gone to plan, but she's obviously, you know, fighting her corner, as it were. And then she comes across somebody who wants some information that she knows from the hospital, and she has to decide whether or not to give that information. And when she does, she gets caught up in a mystery of her own.
Wow. Well, thank you both so much. That was the last of my questions that I have here. I just want to thank you both for allowing me to interview you and trusting me with it. And I'm going to hand over to you now to do your reading from the first book, which is The Case of the Black Tulips. So is it Paula that's...
Yeah, it's me starting
it off. So
okay, so I'm going to start just to say these are edited extracts of the chapters too, so that we're not reading for hours on end. So this is me to start with, because as Liz said, The Case of the Black Tulip started with my idea and therefore my character. Chapter 1, Catherine. The house had felt lost at sea for 2 days. Yellow fog pressed against the windows and seeped under the outer doors. On Saturday afternoon, when I came home from work, I could barely breathe and stood gasping on the doormat, trying to replace the sulphurous tar with the smell of baking. Once inside, I felt as if my household were the only people in the world. It was almost a relief to wake to pouring rain on Monday. Almost. I stood in the hall and wrestled Father's umbrella from the stand. It was 2/3 my height. Unfurled, it would be twice my width. A fresh gust battered the door. There's nothing for it, Catherine, said Aunt Alice. You'll have to wear galoshes and your father's raincoat. Father is 6 feet tall. I am 4'10". I would look utterly ridiculous. I felt my shoulders sag as I weighed up the options. I could be drenched but stylish, or stay dry and resemble a walking advertisement for second-hand clothes. Aunt Alice shook her head. There's no point in wearing good things in this deluge without a coat. By the time you arrive, they'll be ruined. You won't attract a nice young man that way. I'm not interested in attracting a nice young man, I said. Well then, there's no reason not to put on the coat, although perhaps, she paused as a fresh onslaught of water crashed against the door, perhaps you could take a cab. We can't afford a cab. The omnibus will be fine. Opening the door, I was nearly blinded by the wind-driven rain. A bedraggled shape clumped up the steps and rummaged in a bag. First post, miss, said the postman, handing over a letter which became sodden and smudged in the seconds it took to change hands. I glanced at the smearing ink. R. Desmarais, Esquire, 7 Mulberry Avenue, Fulham. I'll take it, said Aunt Alice, sheltering behind the door. No, it's... I shoved the letter into my bag and wrestled the umbrella open. I'll take it with me. A few minutes later, I was sitting on the omnibus, dripping. I heaved my arm free from a stout, perspiring man with a pipe and pulled the letter from my bag. Inside was a short script in old-fashioned hand. Dear Mr. Desmarais, please forgive my writing to you, but I'm so very afraid. I've tried to send for help, but I'm told I'm imagining things, or worse, mad. They said someone called Mary was missing, and I remembered that name. It made me think of kindness, but I can't recall why. And I thought they said the name Meg, although perhaps I'm mistaken. Mr. Desmarais, is it true I wrote to you once before? If you can help, please could you put a notice in the personal column in the Times with reference to black tulips? That was what I'd ask you to find out about, I think. Please help. If somehow I receive your answer, I will write again. I'm afraid for Mary, and for myself. Isn't this your stop, miss? Said the conductor. The omnibus was coming to a halt. I shoved the letter into my bag and stood, wrenching my coat and skirt from under the stout man. On the pavement, I took a breath of wet but comparatively fresh air. The letter seemed to burn through the leather of my bag. What had the writer expected Father to do? I needed time to think, but I would be locked in the office with a typewriter all day. Father had been on his travels for 3 years without a word. Everyone said he must be dead. Then a thought crossed my mind. What if the writer wasn't the person who was in danger? After all, Mary and Meg are common names. My little sister's pet name is Meg. Chill went through me. It was down to me to work out what to do. Only I didn't know where to start.
Right. Chapter 2, and Connie is going to pick up the story. As soon as I walked into the restaurant, I felt out of place. It was drab and cramped. The customers' damp clothes steamed, and the place smelt of mildew, stale perfume, and gravy. You staying, miss? Asked a waitress. I considered leaving, but I had no umbrella. I nodded, and she indicated a vacant seat nearby. Sitting opposite was a young red-haired woman about my age, huddled over a plate of stew and reading a letter. I couldn't tell if the smudges on it were from rain or tear stains. She noticed me looking, stuffed the letter into its envelope and put it into a pocket of the large man's coat on the back of her chair. Correspondence is generally presumed private. I didn't mean to look, I said. Sorry. She dissected the dumpling. Is it nice? Is what nice? The, stew. I haven't been here before. Oh, it's edible, just. I consulted the menu and the waitress was at my side in an instant. I would like a pork chop, please, with mashed potatoes and green peas and a cup of coffee. Right away, ma'am. The waitress bustled off and I stretched my legs out. Ow! The young woman reached down to rub her leg. Sorry, I said again. There isn't much room. No, which is why you keep your feet to yourself. It's all right for you, you're small. I've paid for my bit of the table, she said. Size doesn't matter. Tell that to the dressmakers. I've had a very frustrating morning. Her eyebrows rose. I have to buy a dinner party dress, I explained. All the clothes money has gone to my debutante's sister and nothing ready-made will fit. I got drenched on the way to work, she said quietly. I have been typing letters for 4 hours. I shall have to type for another 4. And someone has written a strange letter to my missing father. Your dress style, Emma, really doesn't interest me. She flounced to the counter, the enormous coat slung over her arm. Your pork chop, ma'am. As I looked at the glistening meat, the heap of mashed potatoes and the bright green peas, I wondered how much more my meal had cost than that plate of dismal stew. But it was here now. I made a hearty meal, and as I rose to leave, Miss, your letter! The clerk at the next table was pointing to the floor. That isn't... Oh, how silly of me. I'll get it, he said, leaning down. Thank you so much. I looked at the envelope. R. Desmarais, Esquire. It must have fallen from her pocket. The address was severely rain-blotted, but I made out a 7, then Marlborough and U, Fulham. Should I leave the letter at the counter? She might come back. Or someone else might take it. No, I must return it. I put the letter into my bag and stepped into the street.
Well, thank you both so much. And yeah, so we will get the links and everything in the slides posted up with this video so that people know where to go to find you and follow you and find the books. So thank you both so much.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Sim.